me. It is a window into your heart. Our speech can be the greatest tool of evil.
Our help comes from the very God who made the heavens and the earth. This evening, the desire of God and the will of God is for every one of us on a personal, individual level to experience this supernatural dimension of God's ability to do for us what we cannot do for ourselves.
Hello, Pastor Aragon. I consider it a great privilege talking to you, and I appreciate you handing us this interview. Just have a few questions, and the first one is an obvious one. I'm just curious, I would like to know about the Navajos. Just a brief description or details about the Navajos.
Okay, the Navajo people are the largest organized Native American tribe in the United States of America. There are about 325,000 recorded Navajos that are still in existence. They would be considered full-blooded. They've been in America dating way back into the 1200s. And we are centrally located in probably central United States. Most of our reservation land is located in the Four Corners states. So we're in New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico cross. And Chinle, Arizona. I live in one of the 5 of the more organized cities on the Navajo Nation called Chinle. That's geographically in the center of the Navajo Nation. So we have our own government, our own president, our own police force, our own telephone company, our own government. So we are a semi-sovereign country within the United States.
So, but have you always lived in Chinle?
No. I was born and raised in Farmington, New Mexico. My parents settled there during the first oil boom that hit New Mexico. So they moved to that area to work and to establish a family home. I lived there until I graduated high school. I graduated at Farmington High. Then I moved to Denver, Colorado for college. Shortly after I went to college, I ended up getting married very, very early before I finished school. And then I moved to Gallup, New Mexico. And that's where I gave my life to Jesus, and that's where I was introduced for the first time to what Navajo people really were.
So Gallup, New Mexico, is it quite separate from the Navajos?
It is the largest trade center for the Navajo people. So it's about 100 miles away from where I live in Chinle, but it does border the Navajo Nation. Gallup, New Mexico does. So does Farmington, New Mexico, and so does Flagstaff. But the Navajo people do go to Gallup to shop more than anywhere else.
So we would safely say Gallup, New Mexico is more developed than Chinle.
Oh yes, by 100 times.
Oh.
So Gallup would have all the modern stores that America would have: Walmart, large grocery stores, and everything you need.
Okay. So first, would you share with us your journey in ministry? How did you get started? What were some of your highlights and challenges?
Okay. I got started in ministry by meeting a need. I really wasn't looking to be sent out. I had been in my mother church about 10 years. I realized when I got saved, I had a very big problem reading. So when I met the disciples that were wanting to be pastors, they were very smart. And they were always reading. Well, I couldn't read. So I worked with my hands a lot. I've always been a very hard worker. And in 1991, 4 Navajo ladies came to a Bible conference in Gallup asking for a pastor. And Pastor Mitchell quickly told them, I do not have a man for you. So I felt very bad for the ladies. I was just greeting at the door. And I felt very bad for the ladies. They're the 4 ladies that I showed the picture of this morning.
Yeah.
So I felt so bad for them. I made the mistake to tell them, I will buy you lunch and I will buy you fuel. And I'm sorry it didn't work out. So I took care of them, very kind. Got them fuel and fed them to go back to their reservation. Well, 6 months later, they came back to another Bible conference. They found Pastor Mitchell, and they asked Pastor Mitchell, we want a church. We found a man. You just need to send him. Well, Pastor Mitchell asked, what man did you find? And they said, we want the guy that's standing at the door. The short Mexican.
Wow.
And that would have been me. They said he was very kind to us last time we were here, and we would like him to be our pastor.
Wow.
So that week I responded to go to their village to be their pastor.
Wow.
And that's how it began. I asked my wife if she wanted to be a pastor's wife. And she looked at me and said, what are we going to do with the rest of our life? Just sit in church? And I said, you would move to that little puny village where there's no shopping? You wouldn't live like a normal American lady? And she said, I would rather do that than waste our life. So we moved, and it began by just filling a need.
And I'm thinking you moved from Gallup to Chinle. How easy was it for you to make the decision to move from a much better city?
Well, the challenges were definitely real. You know, you can visit a little town and it looks okay, but we couldn't find a home. There was nowhere to live. Nowhere to rent. Money couldn't even fix the problem. So we kept looking. So I pastored for the first year living in Gallup, and I would drive back and forth 100 miles. And finally a home opened up, but it was owned by a gentleman who didn't take care of it, so the house didn't have a kitchen or a bathroom. So I moved my family into that. And obviously I had to build a kitchen and I had to build a bathroom. But we stayed in that home for 9 years. I raised my family in a very small house.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was quite interesting. It was difficult. The inside of the house didn't have interior doors. So, like any good American, Mexican, whatever you want to call me, we hung blankets for doors on the inside. And that's kind of how we grew up in the first years of the ministry. The church, we also had an abandoned house for a church building. It was very small. Didn't have a bathroom either. We used to have to go to the bathroom at the closest store. So obviously we had to put a bathroom there as well.
Yeah.
So it was very challenging to move into that type of atmosphere. And then there was a language barrier. They spoke their own language, and we didn't speak their language. So I used an interpreter for many years of the first years of the ministry.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, how easy was it to challenge people to give to the work of God in
Oh man,
ways like that?
now you're getting personal. There were probably 2 or 3 very distinguishable things that I recognized had to be dealt with immediately. The first one obviously was money. They, much like any oppressed community or town, they viewed, for no other choice of words, they viewed the white man as being very wealthy. And they always had their hand out, always. They expected somebody to do something for them. The Navajo term was Chinle, which translated means, please do it for me. So when I got there, I was the rich man, and I was supposed to do everything for them. So I recognized the desperate need to teach them kingdom finances. And I taught them how to tithe. I challenged them to go to work because the government took care of us all. And I challenged them to get jobs, and I taught them how the kingdom of God works. That was a major challenge. The second large challenge was nobody got married. And I'm sure it's not like that here. Everybody just lived together and made families. And I realized that God can't bless them until they get married properly. And those are the two huge challenges that I faced. And today they've gotten jobs that are very blessed. We support our own international works, American level. So we've come a long way, but it's interesting you ask that because the finances were a big issue. So I challenged them to build a church. We have a beautiful building that we built and paid for. And then when we began to launch Navajo couples to other reservation towns, many times we had to build a building there as well. In many cases we had to buy a mobile home for the pastor. So today, 30 years later, we own probably $3.5 million worth of properties, churches and houses that we've built and paid for.
Wow.
So now we have churches that are beautiful and houses for the pastor to live in. And yeah, it was a great big challenge.
Knowing the great work that you've done in Chinle, and I think I heard you mention during the men's rally and also in our first service this morning, how that Chinle is pretty much like most places in Africa.
Yeah, I've been to Africa several times. I obviously don't live here, but I have been to some of the compounds and some of the slum areas in Africa. And they are much larger, but we have many places in my little town that look just like that, where people live without running water, trash built up everywhere. We still, I shouldn't say we, but many people still burn trash in our little town, which is totally foreign to America. Even in our church compound, it's not unusual to have horses, cows, goats that kind of run wild even on the streets of the little town. So we have 2 proper roads that are paved, but the majority of the roads around the community are all dirt. So there are many dirt roads. So when it rains, much like Africa, there's mud everywhere.
And in such places, most people tend to limit themselves in regard to building a great work for God and what they can do. And so how were you able to break out of that shell and build such a great work? And you have missionary works in China, Vietnam.
I'll tell you what we had to do. We had to change the way they thought. In their mind, they didn't feel like they could go beyond themselves. But when I began to challenge them that there was no difference between us and anybody else, and if we would work hard, God would bless that. So obviously it took many years, but when they seen development in their building, I challenged them to dress proper, to work. Dignity came quite quickly. And we became a centerpiece for the whole nation. We've had every single president since I've been there come and visit the church.
Wow.
because they're amazed. We got kids off the street, got them delivered from alcohol and drugs, and I personally made them go back to school. I'm probably the only pastor in our fellowship that used to have grade check in the church. I would want the report card from the school. You are doing terrible in English. You're doing horrible in math. No, you can't be in ministry unless you get your grades up. So it took a while, but dignity came quickly. And when they began to see that they were equal to anybody, it became a glorious incentive for them to go beyond themselves. If you remember, we used to take care of the tents, and I would make them work night and day to do it at an excellent level. Even to this day, when they go to men's classes, I make every one of them get in a suit. And I make them all enter into the building together. So they just had the men's rally in Prescott. We sent about 30 men, and they pulled into the parking lot. They still do it to this day. They go in together. They're all in suits and ties, and they draw attention from everybody that's there. The Chinle men are here, and they are top-notch. So it did take a while, but it took a lot of preaching, a lot of one-on-one, lots of encouragement, and lots of exampleship. I think one of the reasons God left me there for so long, because it's very unusual. I think there's only 2 or 3 of us in the whole fellowship that are still in the church they pioneered. I know Pastor Warner and I think there's one more. We're still in the same church we pioneered. So I've been there 30 years. It took many years to gain trust, but now I've become one of them. They use a term in Navajo called Denohinigi, and that word translated describes me, and that word means he's become one of us.
Wow. Wow. It's amazing.
It is amazing.
And the great work that you've done. I remember one of the Prescott conferences, I'm not quite sure if it was last year, when Pastor Joe Campbell called you up to talk about the HBO. Yeah. So that's probably what inspired the documentary, the HBO.
The documentary is out. It's called Navajo Police Class 56. There are 3 one-hour sections that began with doing a documentary on the Navajo police. We see death at catastrophic levels. During COVID, I did 280 funerals myself. I've buried 30 teenage suicidal hangings, scores of people that have died violently, drive-bys or alcohol-related. The Native Americans have 5 times higher fatality rate due to alcohol than any other race in America. So we're around death a lot. So HBO was interested in the dynamics of the police. The police department is very small for a vast portion of property. So one of they call them cadets, that was trying to be a Navajo police officer, he stood out from the rest of the men very clearly. He was clean cut, no tattoos, no bad attitude, very friendly. So HBO was very interested in him. What makes you so happy? Why are you here? You stick out from all the other cadets. And he told HBO, well, truth is, I grew up in church, and my parents grew up in church. And he gave his testimony. And from that moment, HBO was so interested in a light that was shining out of a very dark area. So HBO went from the police academy and tracked the Potter's House down in Chinle, Arizona. And I sat in multiple interviews with HBO. I watched all 3 productions. I didn't get the press I thought I was going to get, but it's amazing to know that our national home box office, what started out to be very bad and ugly, graduated with me praying for the police officers in my church building.
Wow.
And HBO was extremely interested. They told me one day that they'd be interested in doing a documentary on the church and the impact that the church has had. And what made it even more interesting is as they began to interview the police, we have several police officers that go to church. And they, we gave our life to Jesus, and we gave our life to Jesus. And then when HBO checked into the hotel, oh, you're with the Potter's House. And there was special favor because of the church, even at the hotel.
Wow.
At the restaurants, oh, you're here filming the Potter's House. We're going to give you a discount. So they were amazed. So the HBO crew actually sat several times in a whole Sunday from serious men's class all the way to evening service.
Wow.
And they all said, we've never been to this much church in our whole life. But yeah, the church has made overwhelming impact in the community. And just for the record, and I think it's supposed to be this way, everyone has those that don't like them. When you preach the gospel, there's going to be, a collision of forces. But I can say the Chinle Church is deeply loved and appreciated by the whole of the Navajo Nation. They view us as a national resource. So I've prayed for every president. Any problem that's catastrophic on the Navajo Nation, they call me straight away.
Wow.
And ask me to pray. I've been a part of a lot of government tragedies, and they really look to us as a resource for the nation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Glorious.
It's pretty amazing. Sometimes I feel like the Navajo Pope.
Well, last question. Sorry, I asked for 5 minutes.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Quite interesting, but the last question is, what's your encouragement to fellow pastors and even aspiring pastors who aspire to start out works in areas like Chinle and Africa?
Listen, I got the answer for every community, every nation of the world, every pastor, and every young man wanting to be a pastor. Jesus was asked by the Pharisees, what are the 2 greatest commandments? And in all 4 of the Gospels, Jesus reaches into the book of Deuteronomy and the book of Leviticus to quote the law of Moses. If you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, all your might and your mind, and if you will love people like yourself, these are the 2 greatest commandments. Then the text goes on to say, all the laws of the prophets hinge on these 2 commandments. If any pastor or any young man will put God first in his life and love God with everything in him and give himself to any race of people, he will change the society as we presently know it. We put a lot of impact on head knowledge, and religious knowledge, and all of those things obviously have their place. But at the end of the day, Jesus says the entire kingdom of God hinges on these 2. Love me and love people, and you will make impact that is priceless.
Wow. Thank you so much, Pastor Aragon.
That was easy.
For your willingness to share your insight and experience.
I'm living in heaven. I'm so happy to be here.